Shabbat Shalom. My name is Paul Golin, and I'm Executive Director of the Society for Humanistic Judaism and also Assistant Stage Furniture Mover. Jews for Secular Democracy is Humanistic Judaism's pluralistic social justice initiative, which seeks to bring diverse Jewish perspectives to the separation of church and state and activate the Jewish community to defend First Amendment religious freedoms. When I say Jews for Secular Democracy is pluralistic, that means it of course includes the viewpoints of secular humanistic Jews because it's our initiative, but also includes Jews from the religious denominations, Reconstructionist, Conservative, Reform, Orthodox, plus Jews of no affiliation, and our friends, family, and allies. The diversity of approaches just within Judaism, let alone among all religions in the United States, is exactly why we are all better protected when our government is not basing policy on one religious approach over all others or religion over non-religion. And this is true for so many of the issues we care about, including LGBTQ equality, reproductive rights, and public school education free from religious indoctrination. Today, it is my great honor to present our Jews for Secular Democracy Constitutional Defender Award to Randi Weingarten. It's heavy. The Constitutional Defender Award is a way for us to honor individuals who have shown remarkable leadership in defending religious freedom for all Americans. Public school education has long been a target of religious fundamentalists who want to control all aspects of American society, starting with our youth. For at least 100 years now, the famed Scopes monkey trial confirming a ban on teaching evolution celebrated its centennial last year. Over the last several decades, nobody has worked harder or accomplished more on behalf of defending teachers and the institution of public school education in America than Randi Weingarten. She is president of the 1.8 million member AFT, which represents teachers, paraprofessionals, and school-related personnel, higher education faculty and staff, nurses and other healthcare professionals, local, state, and federal government employees, and early childhood educators. The AFT is dedicated to the belief that every person in America deserves the freedom to thrive, fueled by opportunity, justice, and a voice in our democracy. Prior to her election as AFT president in 2008, Weingarten served for 11 years as president of the United Federation of Teachers, representing approximately 200,000 educators in the New York City public school system. Weingarten is the recipient of many commendations. She was included in Washingtonian's 2021 Washington's Most Influential People, City and State New York's 2021 New York City Labor Power 100, and in 2017 received the Roosevelt Institute's FDR Distinguished Public Service Award. In 2013, the New York Observer named Weingarten one of the most influential New Yorkers of the past 25 years. Weingarten holds degrees from Cornell University's School of Industrial and Labor Relations and the Cardozo School of Law, and also served as an educator teaching high school history, law, ethics, and political science. Weingarten is also the author of the excellent 2025 book, Why Fascists Hate Teachers. There's an example, in which she clearly articulates how democracy and freedom are reliant on a well-educated populace. In the section about how teachers teach critical thinking, she writes, quote, "Authoritarians actively attack truth, knowledge, and critical thinking because an uninformed public is easier to control. Degrading public education and critical thinking skills may only prime more Americans to not recognize disinformation and misinformation and take authoritarian leaders like Trump at their word. In other words, those inclined to support authoritarianism exhibit a general avoidance of or allergy to critical thinking, and authoritarians like it that way." Obviously, critical thinking is one of the foundational values of humanistic Judaism, and we are aligned with so many of the positions you articulate in the book and in your work throughout your career. Thank you for accepting this Jews for Secular Democracy Constitutional Defender Award, and thank you for all that you do on behalf of all Americans. All righty. On, off. On. It's on? Great. I'm just
Testing.
going to keep saying on. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I have a bunch of questions, and then we will have time to open it up for Q&A, but I'm gonna start off. And I'm looking forward to a wide range.
Some vodka in here.
No. Unless you want it. I'm looking forward to a wide-ranging conversation about current attacks on public education. So let's start with who's leading these attacks. In your book, you point to, quote, a group of anti-government, anti-pluralism, anti-opportunity fascists, oligarchs, and far-right activists who are demonizing public school teachers so they can divide the American public and destroy public education as we know it. And I appreciate that you don't pull any punches there. And of course, it's not just public education they're coming after, but many other rights and freedoms that Americans value as well. So can you speak a bit about who are these people and what is their ultimate goal?
So can I just first say thank you and Shabbat Shalom, and it is really an honor for me to be here and to, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm never accused of not speaking up. Can you hear me now? Thank you. Can you hear me now? I think you have to. Testing. Is that better? Or do you need it louder? Is that okay or no? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Better? Okay, I'll try to kiss the mic. So I just really wanted to say, for those of you who don't know, I'm actually married to a rabbi. I spend a lot of Friday nights, or when she was the senior rabbi at Congregation Bet Simchas Torah in New York City, I would try to do everything I could to be, in the rabbi's wife's chair Friday nights, so I'm really quite touched to be here and to be with all of you, and to be with all of you this weekend, where you are actually celebrating secular Judaism and the humanistic components of all of that. So I just really wanted to say thank you first, more than anything else, and to express that gratitude for this and for that recognition. But to particularly, and I promise, Paul, I'll answer your question, but I want to express gratitude first, which is that what the service that I just observed and participated in represents is, in my judgment, the best of Judaism, in the sense of thinking about not just tikkun olam, not just in repairing the world, but in fighting for the world to be deeply humanistic, and fighting for that core, and whether that was from and Sharon, my wife, often uses that same quote from Rabbi Tarshan, I think, about, you don't have to finish the job, but you cannot walk away from it. You have to participate in it. For this moment, we have been born. And so I just really wanted to just say thank you for all of that. And I'm really, really honored to be here. So now that I've forgotten your question, so I will answer only the question I want to answer. I think the reason I didn't pull any punches, although, there's a lot of things, particularly with AI and with what the oligarchical forces right now are from the tech billionaires, and from, frankly, what we're seeing not only in this country, but what we're seeing in the way in which this global income inequality is operating and the corruption is operating is that there are literally, I think, two ways of trying to move forward in any in the world. One of them is essentially the strongman, whether it's the king, the despot, the demagogue, the authoritarian, the fascist, the totalitarian, them literally with their buddies running the world, or a sense that the people actually run the societies that they're in. And it doesn't mean that the people running the societies that they're in are always perfect. I mean, if you have elections, sometimes elections don't go the way we want them to go. And you get pretty awful people who have been elected. But still, the point is, you have those two, literally in the world right now, you have those two extremes. That and the authoritarian extreme, the strongman extreme, the income inequality that in some ways follows that or starts that, has taken over from what was a post-World War II environment in the world, particularly in the first world countries, that said never again. It didn't just say never again about Jews and that genocide. It said never again would there be an attempt to consolidate power in the way that power was consolidated, at least in the Western democracies. I mean, think about NATO. The fact that NATO has this provision in there that says if one is attacked, we will all be there. And in some ways, I kind of fast forwarded to just this week, the Southern Poverty Law Center was indicted. For what? Because they were doing their job to fight hate. And there are many of us in the not-for-profit and the labor world that stood up for them and are standing up with them. But there were several of us this week who said, could you imagine if we could have erected a pact amongst and besides ourselves that said, if one of us are attacked, all of us would fight back? And so we're in this moment of great trepidation, and what I tried to do, and a moment that's fraught, and what I tried to do by telling stories, by looking at it through the eyes of educators, as opposed to through the eyes of historians or pundits, was to actually really talk about the moment that we're in and create both a warning about it. That's why the title, Why Fascists Fear Teachers, that's why the word fascist was in the title. But also, if you read it or if you know anything about me, I always couple the problem with the solution, because the solution is what is missing so often in America. In fact, what I have come to understand about the 2024 election, and frankly, maybe even the 2016 election, is that what people heard us saying when we said fight for democracy, they heard us saying fight for the status quo. Because the people that voted for Trump, and I'm not being, I don't want to be political here, I'm just being factual. The people that voted for Trump, many of them, the difference, take in Michigan, between Trump and Harris, were people who were saying, my life is worse, it's not better. And so what you're saying, by just saying, no, we want to keep democracy, you're not saying to me what we need to do so that my family's life is better. that my life is better. And so what happens in all of this, whether you call them oligarchs or the ultra billionaires, I mean, look at what Elon Musk has done in the last few days. They've done an analysis of his tweets and posts, and they are most of them, I think that he had like 80%, I don't remember the specifics right now, but a disproportionate amount of them are essentially racist. And even after the ADL has done everything in its power to self-immolate itself to attempt to make him their friend or vice versa, he has said recently the ADL is a hate group. I mean, so you think about the richest person in the world and what he is doing, and then go back to Ford and what Henry Ford did. And so there's a combination here of billionaires or millionaires in thinking that they own the world without the kind of check and balance, wanting between him and Thiel and AI, wanting to basically have a surveillance state and what they would do with it. And so that is fascistic behavior. The saying that, you know, that there is a, you know, entity in his view. If you look at his tweets, he'll say over and over again, white people have been oppressed, that there should be, that there's, that, you know, he will complain vehemently about things like, I don't know, Social Security, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not terribly different than what you hear from white nationalists. It's not terribly different than what you've heard from apartheid leaders in South Africa. I mean, so, and this is the richest man in the world, and who is about to get from Donald Trump a huge ability to take SpaceX to be worth 100 times more than what it should be worth on paper. So I wanted to create a warning. But the flip side is this. The system of public schooling, of universities, of a democracy that can work for all, of pluralism, of teaching kids critical thinking, of creating opportunity for all, of lifting all boats. Essentially, what we've tried to do, as imperfectly as we've done it for the last 60 years, but what we've tried to do, that is empowering. That creates agency. And the real question will be, which side will win? That will, and we are in the middle of it. That's why that quote from Rabbi Tarshan, we're in the middle of it. We have to engage in this. None of us are going to finish this job, but we don't have a right, if we believe, as you all believe, in a better humanity, we have to engage.
Thanks. There's so many different things that there's so many challenges. So since you began touching on it, let me ask you about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which are all three words that I very much believe in and see as positive values. And obviously DEI has been turned on its head. It's this catch-all boogeyman for the far right that has just flipped an understanding of racism as you're describing and set back the civil rights era equal opportunity legislation. Can you talk, and as you also mentioned, that DEI has been kind of a central goal of public education in America historically. It's been an opportunity to incorporate waves of immigrants, including many of our own families, into American society and raise up those who come here with little to nothing. So can you talk a bit about how it has been a central goal of public education, and how can we help more of our fellow Americans get back to understanding diversity, equity, and inclusion are all positive values?
So can I, to answer this question, I promise the rest of my answers will not be nearly as long as the first. But can we, how many people here have ever taught school? Taught school. We're a school teacher. Taught school. Okay, keep your hands up. How many have ever been in a classroom? In a classroom. Like taught or were taught. So how many, that should be everybody in the room. This is not a trick question. Okay, so for those who taught or for those who were taught, remember the first day of school. First day. I don't care what grade one is in. The first day of school, there is a classroom, and most of the time, there is a diverse group of young people who are in that classroom. You heard me. A diverse group of young people. Every single time you were in a classroom, particularly the first day of school. So what does a school teacher do? A school teacher takes that diverse group of young people and puts that diverse group into an inclusive environment, and we try every single day to try to create opportunity for every single child or young adult that we teach. Why do I say it this way? Because if we start actually using terms in the way that people can hear it, understand it, and say, yeah, that's what we do. They try, the one thing about the right that's really, really good is that they spend a lot of money on this. They try to figure out ways that if they'll throw spaghetti on the wall. And if something sticks, then that's going to be the thing that they use to divide. And they'll, they have a lot of money, they'll try to do this. And then when they see something that can divide, because it's a word that's used in a different way, like DEI, used in they start making it scary or divisive. As opposed, and then what we do, sorry, I'll just say myself, is that we immediately walk right into their trap and say, oh no, that's not what DEI is good. No, DEI is bad. No, DEI is... So all of a sudden we're having a debate over a term that most people have never used in their lives, and then they heard it being weaponized. As opposed to, what is it that we do? What is it that we believe? And so part of what we have to do is we have to actually re-own language in a way that's comfortable for each of you to talk about it, as opposed to letting them own the language. The same thing happened with critical race theory. I often said to people, I took a law school class where my professor taught about critical race theory. And that was many, 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 many years ago. And so I understood what it was. But I don't know a teacher in K-12 who, I still don't know a teacher in K-12 who ever taught critical race theory. But immediately, we were in the middle of a discussion about not only whether you should teach it, but whether it was right. Instead of actually saying, first off, teaching about disparate impact of discrimination is probably a good idea. That's what critical race theory is. It's not just discriminatory treatment, but the impact of discriminatory treatment. Like, for example, what happens to a community if you had redlining, or you had no, black people cannot buy land in, X community or Y community. And then what happens in terms of intergenerational wealth? So if all of a sudden the first time black people can buy land is, our parents' age or our grandparents' age, when white people could buy land for generations and generations and generations, of course there's going to be a difference in terms of intergenerational wealth, because a home is normally the most important piece of wealth you have in a family. So having a discussion about the impact of that kind of law, that kind of discrimination on wealth of a culture or wealth of a race, that's a legitimate conversation to have. So, but by them weaponizing a word and by people immediately getting defensive, what we have to do is both take back our ability to argue, to listen, to learn, and to parry with each other. So part of why I tell a lot of stories, or I started doing that kind of exercise, is I suspect after I just did that exercise with all of you, you'll feel like you have more ability to fight back on using DEI. And so that's part of what we have to power through. But I'm going to say it, I'm going to add one caveat. Don't do it alone. Just like you're in a community here. It's not, have discussions with people together. Don't protest alone. Don't be out in the world alone. Do things together as a community. Because what the authoritarian wants more than anything else is four things: isolation, fear, division, and apathy. And so that is what they live on. That is why they are successful. There are more of us than them. Hungary just proved that. So if you know that they're looking for division, the spaghetti, figuring it out, isolation, fear, but then apathy. Okay, I'm not going to get involved in this conversation. I'll just walk away. And then all of a sudden, even with your friends, oh, they're about DEI. Really? Didn't you ever go to a classroom? What about DEI? What about a diverse? So you see what I'm saying. So DEI it's those words are new, but it is foundational to the 1950s civil and 60s civil rights laws. It's foundational to our Constitution. It's foundational to opportunity. It's foundational to Brown versus Board of Education. It's foundational to us as Jews having more rights in this country. It's foundational to the First Amendment in terms of the separation of church and state. It's foundational to the 19th Amendment in terms of the right for women to vote. It is foundational about trying to create a world where everybody wins and participates, as opposed to the world that the authoritarian or the demagogue basically tells people what their status in life is.
I'm glad you went to critical race theory, which was the DEI of 5 years ago. They're always on to the next thing, and they're so seemingly unified on what that is that you haven't even heard complaints about critical race theory, but they're trying to turn the clock back on all of those things that you just mentioned. Diversity, equity,
and inclusion. And inclusion.
Yes. So along those lines with critical race theory, it is about American history. And one of the reasons that you spell out in your book that fascists fear teachers is because they teach, quote, honest history, which it's a shame that we even have to put the word honest in front of history, but there's now so much revisionist history, or at least removal of history. And our initiative has been looking a lot at the book banning that's happening now at an accelerated rate, at the Moms for Liberty phenomenon, curriculum that are being submitted by Prager Institute and other far-right organizations. How do teachers and other school staff, like librarians, handle it? Are they feeling this? And how can we help them push back on that?
So first, all help is welcome. Of course, teachers and librarians are feeling this, and they're feeling it in many, many different ways. What the authoritarians really want is for teachers just to shut up and just to do exactly what they want us to do and to be very compliant. But frankly, to be quite honest, there's been many other times in American history where that has happened too. Like, think about the McCarthy era. It was pretty repressive. I mean, my mother taught in Nyack, New York, in Rockland County. I grew up in Rockland County, New York. I mean, I watched her and her friends being infantilized all the time. So I wouldn't want to say that a couple of years ago was like the halcyon time of public education. It's always been, there's always been issues because what education has to do is we really are the teachers of society and the teachers of the next generation. And we have to actually try and navigate through all of the shoals of everything that society at that moment visits upon children and their families. And so you're always dealing with the cultural issues and societal issues. The difference now versus, I would say, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or certainly in my lifetime, I wouldn't say McCarthyism, but my lifetime, is that there's an intention to destroy public education and pluralism. There's an intention to actually destroy what public schooling is about. And because all of this stuff is to basically say, oh, public schools are really scary. Oh, look what's in these books. Look what teachers are doing. Look what they're, look how they are calling young people by their nicknames. I mean, I don't know. My real name, spoiler alert, is Rhonda. My nickname is Randy. I was never called Rhonda in my life. With great trepidation, every time I went into a new grade, because when I was 5 or 6, I didn't speak. So with great trepidation, I would go to my teacher my first day and say, please call me Randy, not Rhonda. That's my nickname. If a child comes to a teacher and says, this is my nickname, do you think any of my teachers would have called my parents and said, oh, this is what she said was her nickname. Should we call her that? I mean, come on. Like, think about what this means. A teacher in Florida got fired for calling the kid the nickname that the kid said the kid wanted to be called. So it's this sense of trying to destroy the way in which we have to create a humanistic society, starting with classrooms. So that's what this is all about. And so my strategy to all of you on any of this is this. If you're in a school district where somebody is banning books, Go to the school board meeting. Not yourself, but with a group of people. Actually, go to dinner first or go to dinner afterwards, because go in an attitude where you're the community. Ask to speak. Ask them to do a book club about the book. This is what happened in South Carolina. They did a book club, a really conservative district. It was on 60 Minutes. They did a book club about all the books that somebody was trying to ban. There were like 100 of them. By the time this school board and the community got through with it, 6 books were banned because they engaged in a discussion about this. What's the reason? Why wouldn't we? What's age appropriate? I often say to people when somebody's saying a book ban, I'm like, have you gone to the media site, Common Sense Media, to look at what they say should be age appropriate? So, I talked about a particular book in my book that was banned for a particular reason. It was a book by Robbie Bryce, and it's one of the most banned books in the United States of America. And why did I talk about this one? Because what this book did was it saved a child's life. Because the child, when she saw a discussion in the book about a man fondling his child, she showed that piece, that section to her mom. And they got the dad jailed because of the abuse. That book saved this kid's life. And that book should be banned? So finding ways to actually speak truth to power in a way that power can listen. That's part of the reason why now, today, 2026, we went from in 2022 in the kind of height of the aftermath of COVID, of so much anxiety, so much what's going to happen, are our kids going to be okay, look how long schools were closed, and on and on. A lot of Moms for Liberty folks were elected to school boards. Now, virtually none. Because at the end of the day, people want public education on a local level. People want schools to work, but the right wing is going to keep on throwing whatever they can throw to say, oh, these are scary places. Oh, they're doing bad things. Oh, and look, schools have to be strengthened. Schools, we have to make sure that schools are the best that they can be. And our job is 100%. Our job is every kid. So it's hard. But what they want is the end of pluralism as we know it. What they want is to fracture society so much so that you don't have public education. That's what the vouchers are about. That's what making schools evil is about. Chris Russo, one of their activists, said it. He said it at Betsy DeVos's school in Michigan. He said that to get to universal vouchers, you need to create universal public school distrust. He said it. He told us. So that's what this is about. Remember those 4 words: division, fear, isolation, and apathy. And so they're going to keep on trying. And if you get together and you go to a school board meeting, or you work with a PTA, or do some of these things that help create book clubs, things like that, it just changes the mix.
Randy, to what end are they doing that to? What is their purpose of fracturing?
They want to destroy...
Establish their own school?
Yeah. They want to destroy public education because public education is the last place in America. I mean, work may be the same. Work and public education are the last 2 places in America where people who don't know each other kind of operate together. Where else? Where else in America do you have diversity? And you don't always have it in public schools, but where else?
So most likely, they're thinking that adds religion into their private schools, eliminating public education.
That's a whole different.
That was going to be my next question.
I was going to
So let
say,
me-
I know you'll get to that
I'll
question.
ask the questions here. No, we're going to do Q&A. So can you wait till we do Q&A? Okay. So you've touched on a whole lot that I did want to get into, and I'm going to kind of
I read your
merge some of the
questions.
questions. I know. We send them in advance. But I really do appreciate the framing of your book, because our initiative, Jews for Secular Democracy, has really been focused on countering white Christian nationalism, and we've been naming white Christian nationalism. But as I read through your book, and you really identify authoritarianism, oligarchy, billionaires, and I think the relationship needs to be described, which is that white Christian nationalism is a tool to mobilize a group of people that are not the authoritarians, but will do their bidding. So like Betsy DeVos, I'm sorry, I don't think she's a particularly religious person necessarily, right? I don't know her, but she's super rich, and she has mobilized a brand of thinking that we see being used to attack, for example, LGBTQ equality. Part of that inclusion that society is, I think, hopefully still working toward, but that we've seen setbacks on because they've been able to mobilize what they claim is a version of their religion, and they've weaponized it. So it's that, and when you talk about the life-saving properties of a book that might speak to a young child, you know, the trans folks are having their lives threatened by the trends that are happening today. So the far right is maintaining this myth that all of our problems in America happened when we took prayer out of public school, that, you know, if only we had more religion, and of course religion means their version of Christianity, their version of the Ten Commandments in every classroom. And they've had success with a Supreme Court that said, you know, I don't know if you know the Coach Kennedy lawsuit that allowed a football coach to say prayers as if it's not coercive. So it feels like we're losing ground on that. So I do want to ask you to speak directly to that religious piece, recognizing, as I think I do from your book, that you're identifying who's behind it, but how do schools and teachers deal with that when folks are coming at them from that religious perspective?
So the bigger issue in terms of the separation of church and state is going to be one that deals with funding. And I mean, the Fifth Circuit just said that it was okay in a 9-8 decision that said, and it was just this week, that said it was okay to post the 10 Commandments on every classroom. Now, what's interesting is that the rationale that they gave was that because young people could ignore it. So then the question becomes, what are they going to do when the Texas curriculum that teaches it, or the Oklahoma curriculum that was going to teach it, what are they going to do at that case? Because you can't really ignore it if it's part of the curriculum. But wait. So what I'm saying is that we have a very different Supreme Court right now than 30 years ago, where they would actually say that you couldn't have a Title I teacher in a religious school because that violated church state. And we used to have all these, non-public school Title I teachers. For those who don't know, Title I is part of the federal law that Johnson actually got passed that tried to level the playing field by putting in lots of federal dollars into schools which had 80% poverty, 50% to 80% poverty. And it was for kids who were in non-public schools as well as kids who were in public schools. And we used to send Title I teachers for reading and math into non-public schools. So the huge difference of opinion in a Supreme Court in 2 generations about what the free exercise and separation of church state means. I am less worried about what the Supreme Court does on this issue. I mean, I'm worried about the funding, but I'm less worried about what the Supreme Court does, as I am really worried about the white Christian evangelist movements that essentially, from my judgment, and I am not a scholar of Jesus and I am not a scholar of the New Testament, but it feels to me that it is pretty much the opposite of what Jesus would have said. It just feels to me that it's kind of the opposite. And in some ways, it's been quite interesting to watch what the Pope is doing right now with regard to this Pope is remarkable, and what he's doing right now vis-a-vis Donald Trump and all of these issues. And so I think that white Christian nationalism was intended as a way to essentially, let me say it this way. One of the problems that I have with the Democratic Party, and I'm a long-term Democrat. My parents took me into the voting booth with them, and I voted for McGovern for them. So I'm like, I tried to do it twice for my father and my mother. But what I'm saying is that I'll always be a Democrat. But the Democratic Party lost the working class. And what happened was that the Republican Party for years tried to get the working class through these cultural issues and through these issues of things were changing so much. And so how do you keep a grasp on what your life is? And they were able to get evangelical churches and others. And so you see then this escalation of weaponization to the point that how would ever you would see the evangelical church be against immigration? I mean, you can understand issues around abortion and LGBTQ and other, about, where the heterodoxy was. But immigration, when every one of our biblical references, whether it's the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quran, I said this, Eric, at Eric Rader, who is the head of the Wayne State, Henry Ford Community, at the Union for Henry Ford Community College. Eric, just wave. And David Hecker, who is also the former head of AFT Michigan, is here as well. These two are my colleagues, and I love them, and I'm so grateful they're here. But every book of religion talks about embracing the stranger and loving our neighbor. And so how is it that evangelical Christians can be about and okay with the deportations that ICE does? How is it? But it is that weaponization, and it is that use of Jesus. But look, that's happened to the Jews for 5,000 years. There's always that weaponization. So what we have to try to do is figure out how to get underneath that in communities. So I'll give you one example. I had a very different view of the Mahmoud case than most of my colleagues. And people were really mad at me because we did not file an amicus brief in that case. Sure. The Mahmoud case was the case from Montgomery County, Maryland, where parents sought an opt-out on religious grounds, Muslim parents, because they did not want their children to have to be subjected to reading books about LGBTQ people. And if you know anything about me, I am LGBTQ, and I don't believe in book bans. But what happened here? Montgomery County didn't have the conversation with parents about what the curriculum in kindergarten was going to be. So the kids come home with either these books or stories, and parents have no idea. And so you have this reflexive, that's not my heritage, that's not what I want my kids to be reading. And so you didn't have any kind of conversation with the parents about this. So bad policy makes bad law. The Supreme Court decision now says there is an opt-out. And there's lots and lots of people that are now opting out of kids ever having to have any kind of exposure to LGBT books or kids or whatnot. We have to find ways, just like the Pope is doing, just like the Catholic bishops are doing around immigration, to basically say, no, this is not dignity. This is not what's in the scriptures. But we have to find ways. You can hear it in every one of my answers. We can't be into fight or flight. We have to be into engagement. If we're going to create a society that believes in the dignity of human beings, we got to figure out how to expand our tent enough that people are with us on these fundamental issues.
How do you scale up that? Because I wanted to ask, yes. I wanted to ask a little bit about organizing. Obviously, union organizing has probably unique aspects, but commonalities with how we can help get out the messaging that you're talking about. So what would you say to folks who are like leaders of congregations or leaders of movements about how to organize people?
Pick something. Just pick something. One thing that you want to do. Don't pick everything. Pick something. There is a treasure trove of issues right now. Don't try to do everything. I heard that schedule of these next 3 weeks and I was exhausted. And what David and Eric will tell you is, you know, I'm on a plane almost every day and I was exhausted hearing it, which is, it's fantastic to have all that community work. But pick a social justice issue that you really love or that the enough people in the congregation want to do. And then delve deeply into it. And when I say delve deeply into it, this is what I mean. Bring people together. First, bring people in the congregation together, and then bring people in the community together, do things that are interfaith, do things, whatever it is. If it's if say it's, you want to help public school, or say it's you're doing, food drives, or say you're doing democracy discussions, or say you're, doing things about immigration and ICE, whatever it is, do it deeply and do it in a way that brings community together. First, all of you, so that there's real mutual aid and mutual support, and then do it in concentric circles, bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what I would do.
Thank you. With great trepidation, I'm going to open it up to questions. And, please, one sentence and one question. And yes. Go ahead, Jim.
What plans does AFT have regarding that membership totally close the shops being charter school?
Let me just reiterate for the web streaming. The question is about what are you doing to, AFT is doing to open closed shops like charter schools?
So I just had this amazing phone call today from Stacey Davis Gates, who is our leader in Chicago and in Illinois, who said, I wanted to call you and tell you this great story about a charter school where the board, and the charter school was started by the rapper Common. And the charter school, the board just voted today for a neutrality agreement so that the teachers, that there would not be any anti-union activity. So the board unanimously voted for a charter, for the teachers to be able to organize if they so chose. And why? What do the teachers want? And what does the board now want? They want to come back to the Chicago public school system because they are watching how this school, which they all love, may be threatened because of the lack of funding or the lack of whatever is going on in that particular charter school movement. And they're really afraid, and they don't want to lose the school. So they want to come back to the public school system, and the teachers want to be organized, and the board of directors want the teachers to be organized. Now we, the AFT, we are the fastest growing union in the United States of America. Everybody we represent happens to make a difference in the lives of somebody else. And ideologically, we go from the left of the left to lots of people who voted for Trump. And we're 1.8 million people. I think right now we're even 1.85 million. And we have over 270 new units since 2022. Henry Ford is growing. David Hecker, who retired as the AFT Michigan president a few years ago, just was able, we've worked on this for 10 years, but he has been in and out of Maryland these last, how many months? So 2 years in and out of Maryland, working on the fact that even in Maryland, that blue state, for the first time ever, and we've been working on this for 10 years, and David, bless his soul, has been in there. He's an amazing organizer these last 2 years, to get non-tenured faculty. We couldn't get tenured, but non-tenured faculty at the University of Maryland will now have the right to organize because of the work that David Hecker and our members have done in Maryland. Florida, at the very same time, even though collective bargaining is in their constitution, because DeSantis is so anti-union, they actually changed the law this year to say that you have to have 60% membership in a union in order to still have your contract. Still have your contract. So they couldn't do, DeSantis couldn't do what Scott Walker did, which was just take collective bargaining away from public sector employees. He had to do it this way because collective bargaining is in the Constitution. So what is happening is that we understand, like the right wing does, that the way in which regular people have any power is one, through education. That's why they're trying to attack it, both K-12 and higher ed. Two, through policy that you get through public officials being elected. That's why they're trying to restrict so much, whether it's the SAVE Act or what Trump tried to do with redistricting. And the third is through economics. And through, most people don't have a contract or any kind of economic rights if they don't have a union. And that is why in the South and all this other stuff that happened was the restriction of unions, the right to work, which was the opposite, the Janus decision, because there is an understanding that when you have enough density, that density, look at what the UAW used to do. Look at what Ruther used to say, that you could win in a contract, you could lose politically. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to reorganize. But it's really hard. And as I said, when I started as president of the AFT in 2008, we had about 1.35, 1.4 million people. Even with everything that has happened, we are now close to 1.85. And that's because people really, even despite all the obstacles, even despite all the shit that's thrown at me, sorry about my cursing, by, the right wing, by Betsy DeVos, by Pompeo, by others, people want to have some power in their lives. And so hopefully, if we get a new Congress and a new administration, we can open up the labor laws so that people who want a union can have it. We're trying.
Oh. One more question.
Thank you.
Yes?
You are one of my ideals that I admire the most, and thank you for being here. I've been a teacher since 1959.
Bless you.
And an AFT member as well when I was in the public school. Now I'm in private practice and education, working with special needs children and adults. We're very worried, our parents are very worried about the end of the Department of Education. And especially for special needs children where there is federal oversight on IEP. School districts providing what those IEPs provide. And I'd like you to speak to the closing of the Department of Education, particularly as it relates to special needs.
For the streaming audience, the question is about the closing of the Department of Education, particularly as it relates to special needs.
First off, thank you for teaching. Second, anyone who was an AFT member and retired off of being an AFT, retired at one point or another, you are always an AFT member under our Constitution. Always. So maybe you should talk to David. We'll make sure you keep your union card. So we have tried to do three things right now to protect kids' rights. The public doesn't want them to close the Department of Education. Not that they know what the Department of Education does. And, there's a lot of mixed feelings because people don't really know what the Department of Education does, and there's a lot of misinformation. The Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, doesn't run one school, not one. The Department of Defense actually runs schools on military bases. The Interior Department actually runs schools, on Indian reservations, but the Department of Education doesn't run a school. So all of this is poppycock when Trump says, "Oh, we're not in the no, they were never in the business of running schools." What the Department of Education was supposed to do, what their mandate was, and frankly, Al Shanker, one of my predecessors, used to say, did not want there to be an independent Department of Education. He actually wanted it to stay in health, education, and welfare because he didn't want kids to be political in this way. And the moment that Carter did this in this way, it's always been a target because it's been, it was viewed as the other unit, the National Education Association wanted this separate. But what has happened is it's a political issue for Trump. It's a political issue for Project 2025 because they don't like diversity, equity, and opportunity, and they really don't like children. And they don't want the future of children. If you think about it, you think about it, they go after SNAP, they go after Medicaid, they go after education funding. The first thing that, I almost called her Betsy DeVos, Linda McMahon does, is she basically says, we're going to make you, people who are in college and trying to make ends meet, we're going to make you pay your student loans, and if you don't pay your student loans, your wages are going to be garnished, or something's going to, it's like we're going to send you to collection agencies. Like, that was the first thing she did. Like, how about the first thing you do is saying, let me go to a kindergarten or an elementary school and see these kids and say, oh, how great you are. No, the first thing they did is say, let's go take higher education students who need student loans and bring them to collection agencies. So you can get a sense, when I say they don't like kids, I've never seen an administration, Republican or Democrat, that basically has such a negative view on kids and don't even want to try to help kids. Like when Melania went, down the hole in the White House with the robot and said that was the wave of the future. So the goal has to be, we took the lawsuits, we've won 3 really important lawsuits on education. I think I've taken 25 lawsuits in the last 2 years. I've never brought so many lawsuits ever. But this one, we won the one about you can't erase history and you can't change diversity, equity, inclusion. We won that one through the appellate courts, and then they withdrew their appeal. So that one, they have lost that. DEI was the law of the land on January 19th, 2025, and it is the law of the land today. It's just, so they lost that. And then what we also won that's really important is that in the appropriation process on, the federal budget for last year, we won back every dime in IDEA and in Title I. So we won the formulas back, and that's also really important. The case we didn't win, well, we won it to the appellate courts, was that they they couldn't eliminate the Department of Education. But then the Supreme Court allowed it on its shadow docket to lift the injunction. So what they're doing now, we're going to go back on the merits. The Supreme Court is going to hear the case maybe in 15 years from now. But what happened is once they lifted the injunction, then they could sell the Department of Education off for parts, which is what they're doing. They have not yet moved the Office of Special Needs because there are parents who thankfully, like us, are like, what are you crazy? You're moving that to Robert Kennedy Jr.? Like, really? Like, so so we have been working with a lot of the parent groups to say, I mean, so you got madness and incompetence and people who just don't care. And so it's kind of like pick our poison here because they've basically fired everybody. And so what we're trying to do right now is just keep function over form. And that's why by winning the stuff on DEI, they didn't even dare to try to get rid of the funding, most of the funding on IDEA, because there's a whole bunch of MAGA parents with special needs kids. Oh, yeah. But they will effectively, until there is a new president, make this such a mishmash that we're going to have to try, if we get a Democratic president, we're going to have to try and find a way to rebuild better than we have right now. And so your state still, if you're in Michigan, your state still cares about special needs kids. Whitmer really cares about special needs kids. And hopefully the fight about who's the next governor is going to be as important on this issue as what we do in the next 2 years to just maintain the funding and try to maintain some of the oversight.
Thank you so much. I feel like we are just scratching the surface, but I hope you get a sense of how much we appreciate your work. Thank you.